Jennifer had always thought that working inside a billionaire's mansion would bring comfort. But after 1 month at the Caleb estate, she learned that money could build walls higher than any fence. The house was huge, filled with gold-colored furniture and quiet hallways, yet it felt cold, like no one really lived there. The only thing that made it bearable were the 2 little boys who called her name every morning, Ethan and Ryan Caleb, the twin sons of Mr. Caleb. They were only 7, full of energy, laughter, and endless questions. To them, Jennifer wasn't just a maid. She was the woman who tucked them in at night when they missed their late mother. She was the one who wiped their tears when they fought, and the one who stayed by their bedside when they caught the flu. Sometimes, when the house was silent and no one was watching, they called her Mama Jen. Each time she heard it, her chest grew heavy with emotion. It reminded her that love didn't always come from where you expected it. But behind her smile, Jennifer carried a secret one that could destroy her peace if anyone found out. She was pregnant. It happened months before she came to the mansion. Life had been hard, then moving from job to job, trying to survive after her father died. When she learned she was carrying a child, she felt fear instead of joy. There was no one to help her, no home to return to, and no husband to share her burden. So when she got the job at the Caleb estate, she swore to keep her pregnancy hidden for as long as she could. She wore loose gowns and tied her apron tightly around her waist. Every morning before work, she stood in front of the small mirror in her room, adjusting her clothes until no sign of her growing stomach showed. Her heart jumped each time Mr. Caleb passed by. He was tall, with calm but serious eyes, the kind of man who rarely smiled. Everyone in the mansion respected him and feared him. He hardly spoke to Jennifer except to give short instructions. Most times, he was lost in phone calls and meetings. He didn't even notice what she wore, and that was exactly how she wanted it. But fear still lived inside her, every day. What if he found out? What if he sent her away? One morning, while sweeping the living room, her hand suddenly grew weak. The broom slipped from her fingers, and her vision blurred. She sat on the couch, trying to breathe. A sharp pain hit her lower back. It was then she realized how real the risk was. Later that day, she sneaked to Maplewood Clinic, a small building outside the city, where the nurse, a kind woman named Clara, confirmed what Jennifer already knew. "You're about 6 weeks pregnant," Nurse Clara said softly. Jennifer's heart sank. "Please, don't tell anyone. I can't lose this job." The nurse nodded kindly. "You must take care of yourself, child. Don't lift heavy things. Rest when you can." But resting was not an option for Jennifer. She returned to the mansion and worked as if nothing had changed. Every dish she washed, every bed she made, every laugh she shared with the twins, it was all a way to distract herself from the fear that never left her. Days turned into weeks. Her belly grew slowly, then more clearly. When she could no longer bend easily, she found excuses to send the boys for things she normally fetched herself. They were happy to help, too innocent to understand what she was hiding. Then one evening, everything changed. Mr. Caleb called everyone to the living room. He stood tall beside the grand piano, his tone firm. "I'll be leaving for 6 months, he announced. "Business overseas. I expect the house to run smoothly in my absence." Jennifer froze in her spot. 6 months? By the time he returned, her secret would no longer be something she could hide. "Yes, sir," she managed to whisper. He turned to her, his sharp eyes holding her still for a brief second, long enough for her heart to skip. Then he nodded slightly and left the room. That night, Jennifer sat alone in her tiny room near the back of the mansion, her hands on her belly. 6 months, she murmured. By then, you'll be here. Her voice trembled. She didn't know if she was speaking to God or her unborn baby. Maybe both. When Mr. Caleb's black car rolled out through the gates the next morning, Jennifer stood by the window watching the taillights disappear. Relief and fear mixed inside her. Relief that she wouldn't face his cold stare every day. Fear that when he came back, everything would fall apart. Weeks passed. The mansion became quieter without Mr. Caleb. The twins filled it with laughter, chasing each other down the hallways. They grew even closer to Jennifer. They noticed she tired easily, that sometimes she sat holding her stomach. One afternoon, while helping them with homework, Ethan placed his small hand on her belly. "Mama Jen, why is your tummy getting big?" he asked innocently. Jennifer froze. She smiled quickly, hiding the worry in her chest. "Because God is giving me a special gift." Ryan tilted his head. "What kind of gift?" "One that you'll meet soon," she whispered, trying to sound calm. From that day, the boys became her little protectors. They carried her cleaning tools, fetched water, and scolded her whenever she worked too hard. Their love made her cry at night, quietly, so no one would hear. Lying on her small bed, she would whisper to her unborn child, "I don't know what will happen when your master returns, but I promise, I'll protect you, no matter what." Outside, the wind moved through the garden trees, and the great mansion stood still, unaware of the storm that was quietly forming inside its walls. For the first time, Jennifer began to count the days not by her work, but by the slow rhythm of her growing belly. And though fear still sat in her chest, something else began to grow beside it. Hope. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly became months. Jennifer's belly was no longer something she could hide. Her uniforms grew tighter, and her steps became slower. But she refused to stop working. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for the twins with all the strength she had left. The mansion felt different without Mr. Caleb. The halls were quieter, softer. The boys often said, "Mama Jen, this house is happier when you laugh." Their words made her smile, even when her back ached so badly that she could hardly stand. At night, she would sit by her window and stare at the city lights beyond the tall gates. She would whisper to her unborn child, "I don't know what will happen when he returns, but I'm not afraid anymore." Her voice was small, but her heart was stronger now. By the 5th month, the pain began. It started as small aches in her lower back, the kind she could ignore. But soon, it grew worse. Some mornings, she had to grip the wall before taking another step. The twins noticed her struggle. One morning, Ethan rushed to her side. "Mama Jen, sit down, please," he said, his tiny face full of concern. "I'm fine," she lied with a soft smile. Ryan frowned. "You say that every time." Their innocence made her eyes water. "You two are such kind boys," she whispered, brushing their hair gently. She didn't know it, but they had already started making plans to help her. They took turns sneaking food from the dining table, hiding fruits and bread in her drawer, so she wouldn't have to move around too much. Sometimes they followed her while she cleaned, picking up things before she could bend. The days passed like that, love quietly holding everything together. Then one evening, as the wind howled outside, the phone in the living room rang. Jennifer hurried to answer it, her hands trembling slightly. "Caleb Estate," she said softly. "Jennifer?" The voice was deep, familiar, commanding. Her heart jumped. It was Mr. Caleb. "Yes, sir. I'll be returning home in 2 days," he said. I hope everything is in order." Jennifer froze. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Good," he said simply, and the line went dead. She stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed against her ear. 2 days. Just 2 days before he returned. Her mind spun. By now, her pregnancy was visible. What would she say? What would he do? That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, her hands on her belly, praying silently. "Please, God, let me survive this." The next morning, she woke up with pain sharper than before. It was still early, and the house was quiet. She took a deep breath and tried to continue her chores. But as she bent to pick up a towel, a wave of pain tore through her body. She gasped, clutching the edge of the bed. Sweat formed on her forehead. She tried to calm herself. "It's too early," she whispered. "Please, not now." But the pain didn't stop. It grew stronger, deeper, until she could hardly stand. She sat on the floor, breathing hard. Then she felt it a warm rush between her legs. Her water had broken. Her eyes widened in shock. "No, no, not no. Mama, Jen." The twins' voices echoed from the hallway. They had heard her cry. Ethan ran in first, his face pale. Ryan followed, holding a towel. "What's wrong?" Ethan shouted. Jennifer could barely speak. "The baby," she whispered. "The baby is coming." Ryan dropped the towel and started crying. "What do we do?" Jennifer tried to stay calm even as tears rolled down her face. "Listen to me," she said, gasping between contractions. "Go to the driver's quarters. Tell Paul to call for a doctor from St. Anne's Hospital. Hurry." The boys ran out crying, their little feet pounding across the marble floor. Jennifer leaned back against the wall, trying to stay conscious. The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last. She didn't know how much time passed before she heard heavy footsteps and the sound of a car outside. Then a voice deep and familiar filled the hallway. "Ethan, Ryan, what's going on?" Her heart stopped. It was Mr. Caleb. He had returned earlier than expected. The next moment, his tall figure appeared in the doorway. His suit jacket was still on, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes fell on her. Jennifer sat on the floor, her face pale, her body trembling, her hands clutching her stomach. For a second, the world stood still. Mr. Caleb froze. He had expected a quiet homecoming, his sons running to greet him. Instead, he saw his maid fighting for her life. "Dad, help her," Ethan cried. "Mama Jen is hurting." Something inside Mr. Caleb shifted. He threw his phone aside and rushed to her. He knelt beside her on the cold marble floor. "What happened?" His voice was rough, but there was a trace of fear in it. "The baby," Jennifer managed to whisper. "It's coming." Mr. Caleb blinked, speechless for a moment. Then he acted fast. He took off his jacket and placed it under her head. "You'll be fine," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. He looked at the twins. "Where's the doctor?" "Driver Paul went to get him," Ryan shouted through tears. "Good," Mr. Caleb said firmly. "Stay here. Don't move." Jennifer cried out again as another wave of pain hit. Without thinking, Mr. Caleb took her hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. He didn't pull away. He held her hand tighter. For the first time in years, the cold billionaire felt something he couldn't describe. Not power, not control, but fear of losing a life that depended on him. He wiped the sweat from her forehead with his sleeve. "Stay with me, Jennifer. You're going to make it." Her eyes fluttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered weakly. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Stop talking," he said softly. "Save your strength." Minutes felt like hours. Then the front door burst open. Driver Paul ran in with Dr. Mason and his medical bag. "She's in labor," Mr. Caleb shouted. The doctor knelt beside Jennifer, checking her pulse quickly. "We don't have time to move her," he said. "The baby is coming now." Mr. Caleb stepped back slightly, his hands shaking. The twins clung to his legs, crying. The mansion echoed with Jennifer's screams and the doctor's instructions. And then, through all the noise, came a new sound, a tiny, sharp cry. The baby had arrived. For a few seconds, the whole mansion went silent, except for the soft, trembling cry of the newborn baby. Jennifer lay weakly on the floor, her breaths shallow. Dr. Mason gently lifted the tiny baby girl into his hands. Her skin glistened under the light, her voice small but alive. "It's a girl," the doctor said. Jennifer's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears as she reached out her shaking hands. "Please, let me hold her." Dr. Mason smiled softly and placed the baby into her arms. Jennifer held her close, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Grace," she whispered. "Your name is Grace." Mr. Caleb stood a few feet away, frozen. Only an hour ago, he had walked into his house expecting order perfection, as always. But now, he had witnessed something raw and human, the birth of a child. His sons stood beside him, holding each other, their little faces wet with tears. Dr. Mason checked Jennifer quickly. "She's weak, but stable." "The worst is over," he said before packing his bag. Driver Paul helped him up, and the two quietly left the room, closing the door behind them. Silence returned, but this time it was different, warm, almost sacred. The only sound was the baby's soft cry and Jennifer's quiet sobs. Mr. Caleb took a slow step forward. His voice came low. "You hid this from me." Jennifer looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "I was afraid," she whispered. "I thought you'd throw me out." For a long moment, he said nothing. The twins stood by, waiting, their faces full of worry. The old Mr. Caleb, the strict, cold man they knew, would have shouted, maybe even sent her away. But tonight, something in him had changed. He knelt slowly beside her, his polished shoes against the marble floor. His voice softened. "No, Jennifer," he said quietly. "I'm not throwing you out." Jennifer blinked, confused. "Sir?" He looked at the newborn resting in her arms. The tiny hands, the little mouth moving as if to find comfort. "You won't face this alone," he said firmly. "Not anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. She had prepared herself for shame and rejection, not this. The twins rushed closer, wrapping their small arms around her shoulders. "Daddy," Ethan said softly, "can we keep her?" Mr. Caleb turned to look at his son. "She's not a toy, Ethan." "I know," the boy said quickly. "But she's small, and she needs us." Mr. Caleb's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. He looked back at Jennifer. "He's right. She needs us, all of us." Jennifer couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She cried freely, clutching baby Grace closer. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Thank you for not turning me away." "Stop calling me sir," he said softly. "Just call me Caleb." The sound of his name on her lips felt strange when she repeated it. "Thank you, Caleb." He stayed beside her for a while, watching her calm the baby. The twins sat near her feet, their small fingers tracing the baby's blanket. For the first time since their mother died, the house didn't feel empty. Later that night, they moved Jennifer to a soft bed in one of the guest rooms. Mr. Caleb refused to leave her alone. He stayed by the window, his tie loose, his shirt wrinkled, staring at the tiny miracle sleeping in her arms. The twins had fallen asleep on the couch, their heads resting together. Jennifer looked up at Mr. Caleb and whispered, "You don't have to stay. I'll be fine." He turned toward her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "You risked your life tonight," he said quietly. "I can't walk away from that." For a while, silence filled the room again. Then he spoke. "You know, I've spent years chasing wealth, trying to fill this house with things. But tonight, for the first time, it actually feels alive." Jennifer smiled faintly, her eyes heavy. "Sometimes love makes more noise than money." He looked at her, surprised by her words, and then nodded slowly. "You're right." As dawn broke, the twins woke up and hurried to her bedside. "Daddy," Ryan whispered, "is the baby our sister now?" Mr. Caleb looked at his sons, then at Jennifer. "Yes," he said at last. "From now on, she's part of this family." Jennifer's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "She's my responsibility." He shook his head. "She's ours. I made a promise last night and I intend to keep it." He crouched beside her bed, meeting her tired eyes. "I will take care of you and Grace. She'll have everything she needs: education, health, a home. Until she's grown, she will never lack anything." Jennifer pressed her lips together, trying not to cry again. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. Caleb looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully. "Because I saw courage in you tonight. You fought for life when most people would have given up. You reminded me what being human really means." She didn't know what to say. Tears rolled down her face again, but this time they were tears of relief. Ethan climbed onto the bed carefully, peeking at the baby. "She's so small," he whispered. "Can I hold her?" Jennifer nodded gently, guiding his little arms. The boy smiled wide, holding Grace like she was made of glass. "Hi, baby Grace," he said softly. Mr. Caleb stood watching his sons, his expression unreadable. But deep inside, something new had begun to grow, a feeling he hadn't known since his wife's death. Later that morning, sunlight filled the room. Jennifer lay resting, her baby sleeping peacefully beside her. The twins sat nearby, whispering and giggling softly. Mr. Caleb stood at the window, watching them, all his family. Not one built by blood alone, but by compassion and choice. Jennifer opened her eyes slowly and met his gaze. "Good morning," she said weakly. He smiled slightly. "Good morning, Jennifer." For a moment, neither spoke. They just watched the baby breathing quietly between them. Then he said softly, "This house used to be full of silence. But your child brought something back I thought was gone forever." Jennifer smiled. "Love?" He nodded. "Yes, love." She looked down at Grace, her voice trembling. "Then maybe she came here for a reason." Caleb looked at her, at the woman who had once been invisible in his world, and felt something shift deep inside. The walls of the mansion no longer looked so tall. The air no longer felt so cold. That morning, the Caleb estate stopped being just a house. It became a home. And for the first time in a long time, everyone inside it finally felt alive.